Okay, recording started. It says it right there. Welcome to Thoughts on Talks. My name is Malayna Dawn, and I'm here with Reverend Michael McMorrow, author of Blue Collar Spirituality: Finding a God That Works. Do you have it? Mine's on my nightstand. I don't have it here. You have
a copy? For it. Where is it?
You took your glasses off, right? I'm sure you can recognize it.
It looks something like this if you find it on Amazon.
There you go. Do a search on Amazon, and then you can find out, like I did. I was feeling kind of blue the other night because I got to the end of Cobra Kai on Netflix, and it didn't leave me in a satisfying place, and I was really depressed. And so I thought, I'm going to read Reverend Mike's book, and it'll make me feel better. And it did.
Oh, good.
Because it's like, you know, talking to a friend when you can't actually call somebody in the middle of the night and say, hey, I'm blue, cheer me up. But you can read the book, and it's like, it's positive and it's simple. It's like just a really easy course correction.
Well, that is high praise. Thank you very much.
You are welcome.
You too. If you're looking for some support at 3 a.m., just download the book. Blue Collar Spirituality: Finding a God That Works on your Kindle.
Oh, there you go. So the Sunday talk was Just Like Me.
Yeah.
Wasn't that the title? Yeah.
That was it.
And you posted on your Facebook page a typed up version of it.
Yeah, you know what?
Just Like Me mantra. Where'd you get that from?
I got that from the CSL talk notes for this week. So I can actually call that up and send it over to you while we're...
I have it in front of me, the Just Like Me mantra from your Facebook page.
Oh, good.
At least, you know, whatever you posted.
The typed page.
It goes something like this. Just like me, you are seeking some happiness in your life. Just like me, you are trying to avoid suffering in your life. Just like me, you have known sadness. Just like me, you want to be loved. Just like me, you were once an innocent child. Just like me, you are a spirit on a journey. And so when we get into places where we feel like the person that we're interacting with or seeing is an opponent, is an opposite, is an other, the Just Like Me mantra can be a very handy tool. I know my friend who told me about it a few weeks ago, she said that she used it in traffic. So she'd get mad because she felt like people shouldn't be on the road so much at this stage in the pandemic, and yet there were a lot of people and they were in her way. And so she was like, just like me, you're trying to get someplace. She just modified it for the moment. But it is, I think, a really great tool.
Yes, it is. And I actually first heard that several years ago by a staff minister that we had here in Granada Hills by the name of Reverend David Alt, who went on to get his doctorate and was the spiritual director out in Atlanta for several years.
Mm-hmm.
But he did a talk just like me.
He's a musician too, right? So he might have even done a song. We might have to research that. I might be promoting something that doesn't exist.
Well, he used to sing in a band called Alliance.
Ah, okay.
And I believe they were a group who sang with Louise Hay back during the days of the hay rides during the last epidemic, where mysteriously killing people, that being
AIDS epidemic.
Yeah.
She was one of the people who said to not be afraid to touch people with AIDS or to hug them or to that was really kind of where she...
Which oddly you can't do with COVID-19.
Yeah.
We are finding out now after the Rose Garden. That's some sad business.
Yes.
The press secretary, who's been kind of annoying because, of course, she doesn't really answer questions directly. but that's no reason. I just hope she doesn't get sick. You know, it's one thing to be positive.
Right.
It's another thing to come down with the illness. So I hope she stays strong. I understand 2 of her assistants also have been hit now. So I think that's like 2 dozen. So
wow.
2 dozen, if it's 2 dozen, that's 24 people out of 150.
And
so
that's pretty high percentage.
That's almost a 20% infection rate.
Yeah.
And I don't know why. I actually posted on Facebook today, you know, that everybody, Biden and Harris, along with the president, and certainly, you know, the vice president shouldn't be going anywhere until the president is fit again, you know, and 100%, you know. Anyway, so we
like
didn't
airline
get on to talk about that, except this is a great place to practice, just like me.
Exactly.
Sometimes you do stupid things, just like me.
Well, and we see people who may be living their beliefs, and we just disagree with those general beliefs, but then we can see them as people and connect to, you know, their suffering, their potential suffering, their families, that sort of thing. That helps us be compassionate. That helps us break down our hardened hearts, and can only help those that we interact with as well. So,
well, I also think, you know, you can tell me if this is a sexist thing to say or not.
Okay.
But I don't think it is. It probably is not generalized to the masculine side anymore. But, you know, you often play injured, or you play sick, or you show up for work sick. Right? And so I wonder if there isn't something within the president who feels like, you know, I got to get back to work. And instead of just, you know, how you go back to work when you probably should stay home for a couple of more days and just get the rest that you really need to put everything to rest. Right.
Right. Yeah.
And so I know I've, just like me, right. I know that I have, which I won't be doing anymore. Right. I have come to church on a Sunday because, you know, the show must go on. Right. No matter what, knowing that I wasn't feeling my best. And, you know, I don't think I've never knowingly been infectious, of course.
Right. And that's the thing. Like, it's okay if you push yourself, you know, it may feel like it's okay. I'm just pushing myself and I can go rest later. But when you realize that you may be infecting those you work with and, you know, innocent passersby, it hopefully makes everybody think again. And that's where
we're going to be reworking all of this now. You know, for those of us who've gone through this, I would not be surprised to see people break out in masks in the winter for another 10 years. That would not surprise me.
I see.
And maybe that wouldn't be the end of the world, particularly.
Well, they're becoming quite fashionable.
Well, once we get away from the idea that the mask is a political statement, right?
Yeah.
And instead of public health measure, that I think maybe what it is that we have to learn to accept that as kind of a thank you for protecting me by wearing a mask kind of thing.
Yeah.
Right. So,
yeah.
Particularly after everybody sees The Social Dilemma.
Yeah, I haven't seen it yet
with the whole facial recognition thing that they talk about in there. Everybody's going to be online wearing masks going forward, so Facebook can't, you know.
Well, that was one of the kind of joke responses that one of the memes I saw on Facebook was, tell the people who aren't wearing masks that, you know, insert name here, whoever they don't want watching them, is using facial recognition software to identify you. And so wear a mask and fool them. And it was, a joke, but
not really.
That's true, because the more technology we get, the more complex things become. I haven't seen The Social Dilemma, but I have been thinking, I mentioned Cobra Kai earlier. And have you been watching that at all?
I watched the first 2 episodes. What a trippy, how you say,
concept.
Yeah. So I'm like, Cobra Kai, why is that familiar? And then I see the guy, and of course he's a handyman and all that. I'm like, oh, this is kind of hitting a little close to home. This could have been my life if I hadn't moved into ministry after 2009, 2010, right?
Mm-hmm.
And without the beer, but anyway, and then to have to deal with this successful guy who, kicked your ass and changed your life when you were a teen.
Yeah.
Luckily, I haven't had to deal with that, because growing up on the Air Force Base, all my successful friends live all around the country, so they don't have to rub my nose in it.
That's nice of them.
Besides, I have no one but to blame except my lazy student self for any of that stuff anyway.
Well, I kept watching Cobra Kai because I wanted to see redemption for the characters, and they do a good job. The writers and creators have done a good job of showing the flip side of each one. So it was very clear good versus bad in the Karate Kid original film, but now there are times when Daniel LaRusso is he's not the nice one. He's not the giving one in that moment. And times when you're really rooting for Johnny Lawrence to succeed. And so it is, I think, if the writers had a message, an underlying message in mind, I would think it would be to learn the backstory of your opponent, understand them, and figure out why they're doing what they're doing. And then sometimes there are people who they're not going to back down from their stance. Like the original Cobra Kai sensei, he was he had the war mentality. It's me or them. That's it. There's no in between. And I don't think that is going to move our society forward. And I'm seeing the parallels between this storyline, this very small, it happens in like Reseda. It's all San Fernando Valley location. Right. And then the parallel to the world we're living in. But that's kind of how I interpret life anyway. I look at stories, whether it's from the Bible or from Netflix or, a song. Right. I look for the message and the metaphor and try to figure out what it could mean, what I could learn from it, what the universe might be telling me, or spirit might be telling me through these things.
The last episode I saw was where he decided to open a karate studio.
Mm-hmm.
I think he was trying to straighten out a kid in his, a smart kid who lived in his apartment complex or something.
Okay, yeah. So
that's early on in the show.
Yeah, and that is really part of the redemption. And they left it saying that the plan is to come back in January of 2021. So we're just waiting. But there are times when, it wasn't a happy ending with a bow on it.
Right. So wasn't that famous actress, wasn't she the girlfriend in the teen movie?
Elizabeth Shue.
Yeah, I wonder if she'll come back and kick everybody's ass like next season.
Well, my brother told me he's been watching The Boys, which I think is also on Netflix, which is a superhero. Like,
that's kind of a creepy show, man.
Yeah, it's kind of hardcore. She's on that, so she may just be contractually obligated elsewhere. Her character in the storyline, though.
What about that other gal, the one who got the Academy Award for hitting her head and hitting the back of her head and dying? The boxing.
Hilary Swank is in a series called Away, which is also on Netflix.
Wasn't she a Karate Kid something or other? Or no?
She was probably in like the Karate Kid 3. You're right.
Oh, okay.
I totally forgot about that.
Well, both. I mean, she's really the one who could.
Well, she was in that Clint Eastwood boxing movie. That's why she won the Academy Award, right?
Right. So I was. Do you have the proverb that I kind of kicked off on?
Nope.
Oh, did you get my? I don't know if my. How did my gags go yesterday with the Halloween reference? Could you see Mike Myers in the dark part?
Yes. What happened was, I think either you or somebody else moved to that slide too soon.
Oh.
So I'm like, why is Jamie Lee Curtis up there? And then I saw the mask, the hockey mask. I went, oh, it's Halloween. Okay.
I know and where he's going.
Yeah. So it kind of ruined the timing of the joke.
I think that's called stepping on the lead or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was on me. That wasn't Evan.
Okay.
I wasn't paying attention to my little setup there.
It happens.
Anyway, oh well. You do what you can. Yeah. You know, I have to say the toughest part about doing this thing without people in the room is trying to be funny or trying to keep it light and having really no idea, because everybody in that room, there's only maybe 4 of us.
Right.
You know, Mike Carlin's busy. Ken and Jason are busy getting set up for stuff. You know, you can't see this behind the scenes, but they're all busy. So
yeah, they're focused on what they
remember to look at the camera and keep talking.
Yeah. And you think about like Jimmy Kimmel and all of the talk show hosts that are used to having a live audience, that they've been doing this too. I know Trevor Noah always says, "Am I right? There is nobody here."
Well, I'll have to use that next week.
Yeah, so it is.
The reason why I asked you about the Proverbs thing is, you know, just to get away from the digressions here.
To digress in a different direction.
Right, because remember we were talking about the vibration of the number 10 from Emma Curtis.
I thought that was really cool.
And how it came from the Kabbalic tradition. And how 10 is the vibration of light, with a capital L, light. And so then I use that to move into since you know, kind of establishing the Jewish wisdom thread to Proverbs, which you know, it always amazes me whenever I go back to Proverbs, right? This is ancient wisdom, just really kind of like spiritual wives' tales, right? That are thousands of years old, you know, aphorisms that are true. And so that's where I just can't remember which one that but it's funny because I'm looking it up on Google, and the one that comes up the most, let's see, where is it? Which I actually had on my list, but I was concerned about it being too seen as being too political. And that one is Proverbs 27. Do not boast about tomorrow, for you do not know what a day may bring. And I was thinking about how appropriate that was for last week in particular. So in this this religious science teaching, where we talk about the power of our word and how it's not enough to just utter something on the surface mind, right? But it's a truth that must be subjectified, right? Which is what we call the subconscious. But the way the theory works within the philosophy, of course, is that the stuff that generates in our life is the stuff that we really believe, not the things we say we believe.
Right.
Right. And so here we are, to put it, this whole crazy thing that's going on right now. We are co-creating all of this life experience together in the United States and globally. We've co-created capitalism. We've co-created government. We've co-created laws and regulations. We've co-created populism. We've co-created socialism and fascism. All of these things that have emerged according to the philosophy, right? We have co-created these on a subconscious level, right? So they're resonating in some way.
Right.
Right. And so here we have this idea where we're denying that a disease, right? So we don't deny the disease. We deny the power of the disease that the disease has over us, right?
Right.
And yet we have a consciousness that's been denying the disease, and that it's a hoax and so forth. But at a deeper subjective level, we all know that it is real. And then it demonstrates as infection.
Yeah, I mean, and you can go to different layers with that too.
Well, and here's a guy who was raised with Norman Vincent Peale, right? And so here's a logical expression of his own consciousness going on.
Right.
And so the healed and the unhealed parts.
Right.
Just like me.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, because when we affirm something to the point of really just putting blinders on the other side, we're not looking at the full picture. We're not looking at the balance. And so I think that's where, spiritual bypass happens. And we think, no, I'm just going to stay up here where it's nice and happy and floaty and everybody's nice. And if you just keep ignoring all the stuff underneath that, it bubbles up eventually, because we live in a world of duality. That is the manifest reality that we are here.
Right. At the level of the relative, at the level of the human experience. Yeah.
Right. And so there isn't that balance if you really just ignore anything that you don't want to look at, because it will come up at some point. And I think that's part of what, I have been watching other shows that I'm like, okay, show me some winning at the end, some superheroes like saving everybody. And they're not anymore. Like, none of the stories I'm watching have absolute good guy win everything at the end thing. There's always, now modern storytelling has shifted to reflect the people.
These dark, unresolved endings.
Yeah, and even when it's kind of happy, there's a sad note in it. There's been a sacrifice, there's been loss, and people come together and do the best they can anyway. And I think that is where I am in my life, that I'm seeing all of this, but I think I'm not alone in that collectively we are seeing this painful part of being alive and having to face realigning or reprioritizing, what is really important to us. Is the stuff, is the things, is the money really important when it comes to our health, when it comes to our families, when it comes to food on the table for some of us, or a home, a roof over our head. And so it's really making us question everything. I think you should put your glasses on because you look like you're squinting.
I am squinting.
So stop it.
It helps me. It helps
You're
me.
like, you're like this far from just falling asleep in the middle of the show. It looks like.
Speak up. I can't see you.
I always turn down the radio when I'm lost somewhere in the car because I can't see if the radio's too loud.
Yeah. Well, you know what I was thinking about while we were talking about all this is that I think many people misconstrue that our teaching tells you can have anything that you want, right? But really what it is, it's what the idea that we embody, which means that we really know it. But anchored in that has to be our spiritual practice, right? So whatever it is that we know the Godhead to be, right? So if we're Catholics and it's anchored in a belief in the Eucharist, in Judaism, within rituals within that tradition, whatever the tradition is, right? That we can speak our word with authority and use this idea of the science of mind, right? But it really does have to start there, because underneath all of that, this God energy, call it what you will, is love in its highest, most absolute, unconditional source. And if we can find a way to daily connect with that and to cultivate, even if it's at an intellectual level, right? Because some days it will be. Some days we're just we're not going to be feeling it, right? But it's important that we take the time to remember that anyway, because the compassion and the loving kindness, which is the outward expression of a love consciousness, will make itself known not only in a generalized way, but also in specific ways, so that we create situations and circumstances for loving kindness and compassion to make itself known as we buy a new car, or as we go to the grocery store, or as we meet a stranger with masks on, and yet we can still communicate. Right?
Yeah.
And I think that's a part that that's been missing, and maybe people don't really understand that it's not just positive thinking.
Right.
And it certainly isn't positive talking, because if it was if that's all we had to do, everyone would have plenty to eat, have a new car in the garage, have a 3-bedroom house and 2 baths, and everything would be fine. But that's not the way it is.
No. And maybe that's what we are learning with this, because as humans, we need that opposition, something to work against, to see ourselves more clearly. We need that contrast. And so we are having to look at each other in the eyes a little bit more, pay attention to body language a little bit more, because we can't see if someone's smiling at us by looking at their teeth because it's behind a mask. At least for most, most of the places I go, people are wearing masks. So, but I did have the experience at the supermarket a couple days ago that I saw somebody without a mask, and I was a little taken aback. It was the first time I had seen somebody in the supermarket without a mask. And I thought, well, maybe she has breathing issues, and, I'm not going to step on her or, try to police her. I'm just going to stay away from her for my health. but she was with an elderly woman who was wearing a mask. So I don't know. I'm going to let the employees of the store deal with that if they dare. But yeah, just the way that we are working with each other in society is shifting because we have this other thing to deal with, and actually lots of things to deal with. It's all up. And
yeah, and it's we've been talking about this for some time throughout the pandemic, but we are really faced with an opportunity to not just tweak things at the margins, but really possibly, and we'll see how things go next month.
Yeah.
Because regardless of, who wins the election, the country has been changed. And you're not going to be able to bring the hammer to it like you could in the 60s, right? Because the world is different and the world has changed. And people want and are demanding justice. So Black Lives Matter really is a call to arms. Well, not call to arms, but a call to awakening for African Americans, yes. Bringing attention to police brutality, absolutely. But it's also a call for all of us to become citizens, engaged citizens, and to breathe the justice that we are calling for. Because it's the only thing it's the only way it's going to get done now, because special interests and the like are kind of, they take over things, right? I mean, have you noticed how COVID now has become like a marketing thing? And it only took a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
We're here for you.
Yeah.
Right. And by the way, while we're talking about marketing, right? Yeah. So it's football season again, right?
Okay. If you say so.
I went out and I bought a new aerial because last year I got so ticked off at my aerial, I threw it against the wall and broke it.
Your aerial meaning your antenna for your television?
My rabbit ear antenna, because I refuse to pay for cable because I think it's a scam. So I just have Wi-Fi.
Okay.
Right.
So do you really have rabbit ears for Wi-Fi?
No, I have rabbit ears so I can watch football on Sunday.
Oh, on your broadcast television that doesn't have, wow, you could still do analog TV. I thought they made it unavailable.
They're HD rabbit ears, apparently.
Oh.
Yes, they've evolved. Okay. But my point is, I hadn't seen commercial television in some time. So when did pharmaceutical companies, I mean, this shit is crazy, man. And
they've been doing this from
channel to channel. Everyone has got some drug, which can, of course, kill you if you don't,
yeah, and that's the crazy
kill you if you've got this condition. But I'm just, these things are expensive. I mean, when we're paying so much for drugs, is this why? Right? Like, how many Escalades do we need to buy in the country? That's the other one. I'm like, why are we still building these gigantic freaking gas guzzling freaking climate changers? Right? And what do you say about someone who feels like they need a vehicle that dumps 4 times more carbon into the atmosphere than a hybrid, or that they need 5 times as much room on the highway? I mean, honestly, we have to become more conscious or we don't stand a chance. We're like
That's it.
lemmings driving our Suburbans over the freaking cliff.
It's a time that we need to wake up and see the consequences of our choices, because we have, as a society, become so slowly hypnotized by the media. And over time, we just have let our faculties of like discernment and questioning go for the most part. And if we have those moments of like, oh, I don't know if I should add my email address to this or put my credit card toward this, or, you know, the things in the social dilemma, share this information online. And then we see, well, if I can't do that, then I can't take part in this whole thing.
Right.
I can't connect on Facebook to my friends that I haven't seen forever. Yeah. And so slowly, it's like the pushing the boundaries, and then we're in it, and we had to make it okay to do it. And it takes a lot to make a change from that, because now we're in it with everybody. So, but those pharmaceutical ads have been going like this for a while, where on the screen, it's happy people living their best life. And the voiceover underneath it is, this could kill you in 17 different ways, three times a day.
That was the thing that I thought was really almost cruel. So there was it was a cancer treatment thing, right? And they have this music underneath it with all of these minor chords, like, you know, very emotive music underneath it.
Yeah.
And little victorious flourishes when they talk about, you know, how this drug could add years to your life. Right.
Yeah.
And I'm like, wow, man, this is some really calloused, hard sell, emotional. We're selling you life right now.
Right.
Because we care about you. So talk to your doctor about this $900 per dose drug.
Yeah,
and your Medicare will pay for 3/4 of it.
When I lived on the other side of the world, I could go to the hospital and get a full physical, all the tests, for about $200. I could get an ultrasound every week, or I think it was every week. When I was trying to get pregnant, I had an ultrasound to see how the treatment was going. Like every week, it was $11 each time, maybe 13. But I could afford to pay these things out of my pocket, partly because I was making US dollars, but partly because it wasn't inflated by this huge pharmaceutical industrial complex that was just trying to suck all my money and life out of me. It was a reasonable price that covered treatment.
Right.
And so to go back and forth from, you know, between countries, between cultures, and see this vast difference, and see that you could get drugs to help you save your life that you might need for an actual condition be a reasonable price, that you go to the pharmacy and you pay something that's within your ability to pay. And then you come to the US and it's like, well, first you need insurance, and then you need to make sure that there's a copay because you couldn't possibly afford this on your own. And it becomes this whole other thing. So I think for most people who have maybe never been outside of the US, even if they've traveled on a vacation outside the US, if they haven't had to deal with life stuff like going to the doctor and, you know, renewing your car registration and things like that, you don't really see the contrast. But if you've lived in another country,
and if you don't see the contrast, then you can't think of it in a different way.
Right.
And if you can't think of it in a different way, then the consciousness around all of it does not shift.
Right.
And I think this is the big thing right now,
Mm-hmm.
is that we have an opportunity to create a shift in consciousness where, as Reagan said, that the idea that a rising tide raises all boats, right?
Mm-hmm.
That we have to understand that we together, in consciousness, have to set that tone, and to and we really have to vision and create. First vision that it's possible, which of course it is.
Right.
Right.
We have
But
to
it just
know
looks
that
like,
it's possible.
right, because it looks like the market, right? The invisible hand of the market now seems like it's everywhere. And is that really what we want?
Right.
Right. And if it is what we want, is it just because we don't want to pay for it? Right. So everything is kind of transactional, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you're going to pay for it one way or the other, right? So people say, for instance, just to stay on healthcare, well, we don't want to pay for Medicare for all, for instance, which I'm not a big proponent of that, but let's just use that as an example.
Okay.
Right? But if that person has to go to the emergency room, the taxpayer's still paying for it.
Mm.
Right. So the question is, so if that person can go and get a health maintenance situation so that they have a wellness regime rather than a sickness.
Right.
So is that actually a more cost-effective way? Right. And is it more just?
So for those things is where you've talked about before, where people have to be willing to sit through boring policy discussions, or you can watch sci-fi, where sci-fi often draws out the logical conclusion of a certain idea and takes it way beyond, what we might face, but gives us food for thought. But not everybody wants to think in those terms, or maybe some people, we all have different strengths. Maybe that's just, there's only a certain percentage of the population who is suited for making those type of analysis and, synthesizing the analysis to share with people in layman's terms,
Right.
So not everybody.
I guess what I'm ultimately saying, right? So we've done a really good job of defining the problem and the challenge, right? But to bring it back to the spiritual solution, right?
Okay.
Is that it's just important that we take and make the time to vision and to pray for that, and to do it confidently, knowing, we don't have to figure out how to do it, but we really do need to know there is that which does know. Right. That's our work as people of faith. And then when we see that thing, right, when we see a policy or something that addresses a particular issue, that we then recognize that we are the hands of which the Spirit does its work on this earth plane.
So when you're describing going into a meditative state and getting in touch with the divine, regardless of what our belief system is, in my head, that creates space, because when you've made that connection and there's more, and you take a breath and you slow down, then you take that extra space with you in every interaction, in every situation that you face. So it's like being able to have a few seconds of contemplation before a reaction. It's that kind of space. When somebody confronts you, you have the space to not feel like they're right here. You have a little perspective. And I think that's what spiritual practice does for us is it creates space between us and the world so that we have room to deal with it and face it and do it from our higher self, from our best self, our most loving, most compassionate self.
To respond rather than react.
Exactly.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I'm saying that as obviously, I am a reactive guy, but I'm far less reactive than I used to be. Far, far, far less. And I've often wondered if that's just, my low T levels. Is that a thing of aging? Or I prefer to think that my consciousness has expanded to incorporate a sense of openness and awareness that I can hold. I can hold more viewpoints.
Yeah.
That I'm not tied to an either or
exactly
way of living my life, except in the ways, of course, that I am.
As you're looking at your phone, I just keeps my Facebook.
I forgot to turn it off. It's Vinu,
okay.
by the way. So hi, Vinu.
Hi, Vinu. So I posted on my Facebook. There's this app called Voca Vote, and you can look it up on Google, voca.vote. And what it does is it presents questions for you to vote on and gives you an opportunity to comment on why you selected what you did. And then they use that information, and I've seen it taken to city council meetings and that kind of thing, where they say, these are the comments that people make, and it's on both sides. And so I feel like it was a good practice for me to read what people who had opposing viewpoints to me, why they selected that. So the one that's up now is the degree of support for reparations for slavery. And this is just in California. Governor Newsom has put into motion to have a analysis of the situation. What can be done? Should it be done? How could it be done? All of these things. So I was surprised to see that so far, out of 6,142 responses, the taller one does not support it. And the second tallest one definitely supports it. Oh. And so
they're not that far away.
No. So
is that 10% or so, or what?
So the column A, which is a little bit shorter, is 35% support some form of reparations. And the tallest one was 45%. Don't support it and don't support studying it, which, that's pretty, you don't even want to look at it. Yeah. But when I read what some of the people said, it shows some of what we've been learning when we do our Black Lives Matter Thoughts on Talks, which I noticed I still have that little logo up on the side, even though we're not exactly talking about that this week. But
they still matter.
They still matter. The disconnect that people have from understanding how Black people have been held back from participating fully in what everybody else has through redlining and all of these different systems in place. So, but the reparations I was thinking could be made through giving them access to those systems, like college credit or home loan access or something that they haven't had. But just reading what the opposition says has been interesting, because sometimes I do really react like, oh, that person's just ignorant. But other times it's like it's a very well-reasoned argument that makes me think, okay, how can I address those issues? If I'm having a conversation with another person expressing this, maybe it would be what makes you say that, or why do you think that? You know, to really change it into a conversation between individuals, but to study what the other side says in a way that doesn't set you off. That is a spiritual practice as well, to learn not to react when you hear certain phrases or when it seems that people have just bought into the sound bites. That's one of the things that sets me off. So again, it's the way the media is being used.
Well, the other thing that I wonder, so in Reconstruction, it was 40 acres and a mule, right?
Right.
But it was something they had plenty of, which was land, and nobody lived on it.
Right.
And I'm sure it wasn't the top bottom land in the valley, right?
Right.
I mean, I don't know what it was. So now that, you know, what is the equivalent of that today?
Right.
So, you know, 1,000 Apple shares.
Right. Right.
You know, a down payment for a condo.
Right.
Right.
So
I don't know what it's going to be, but
somebody mentioned how the native tribes have been given these concessions to have casinos on their land,
right.
And to manage those. So that was a form of reparation to the tribes that were here that were not treated well. And there were some reparations made toward Japanese Americans who were interned during World War II. So it's not that America has never done it before.
Which is a far smaller population.
Yes.
So it's an interesting, you know, because many conservatives would argue, well, gee, you know, I'm not the one who enslaved them.
Exactly. That's what, and you can vote on.
And
on
that may be true, but our government did, and
we've all perpetuated it by just
right. And you know, we also have to be willing to admit that our ancestors, and not that far away, really, our grandparents. It's not like our great grandparents. No. Our grandparents turned the other way.
Right.
Right. So my parents were young. You know, in the 60s, my parents were in their 30s. Right. So they had a young family and so forth. So, so it would be, of course, my grandparents were in Ireland getting their ass kicked. So they weren't in the States yet.
Right.
But certainly, if you lived in the South, you certainly turned the other way. If you lived in some of the communities in the North, you know, during the Great Migration, there was plenty of resentment to go around. And, you know, Kamala Harris spoke to, you know, busing, of course, which Biden did not support. But,
right.
I mean, that was a huge thing back in the day.
Yeah.
So, which is not a reparation as much as trying to make an accommodation. So isn't it interesting that the easiest thing we found to do was to bus the kids into a neighborhood instead of finding ways to move families into the neighborhoods? Because that really is the answer. And that really is a reparation.
Yeah.
Right? And I mean, that is social change.
That would definitely be social change.
So, and I don't even know how you could do it.
No, that's the thing, that it's really going to take new ideas. And
well, this is what we know for sure. Okay. When the ruling elite want to have an offensive war and not raise taxes, they can find the money to do it.
Right.
When they want to save the banking system to keep it from total collapse, which I appreciate, but they can find the money to do it. when they want to fight a pandemic and pay people to stay home, they can find the money to do it, right? And so when they want a new weapons system, they can find the money to do it.
Yeah, so the will is
right.
there.
So you can either build four, F-38 fighters or whatever they're up to, whatever number they're up to now, or you can build a hospital.
Right. Exactly.
I mean, that's really what we've been doing. And by the way, that's what the Chinese have been doing while we've been blowing our dough. Right. And once we build a weapon system, then all we have is that we have to create a need to use it.
Right.
Which is what we did. So we're stuck in this again. It comes back to consciousness, and it's not a liberal conservative thing. It just isn't. Liberals love America, maybe even more so because they're willing to be subjected to ridicule, right? And they love the flag, and they love human rights and the rights of all humans.
Right.
Right.
I heard a great line last night on Netflix. I watched Enola Hughes, which is the story of Sherlock Holmes's younger Enola Holmes, I'm sorry, Sherlock Holmes's younger sister. And there's a character, a Black woman character who knows martial arts. And she says to Sherlock Holmes, "You have no interest in changing a world that suits you so well," because he's a wealthy white British man in Victorian times. And so there was a vote being taken from the Lords that could have gone toward the common people having a little bit more access to choices that helped them. And the elites did not want to let that little bit of power go. And so I just thought that line was great because it really shows that for most white Americans, there has been no reason to make changes because they were either completely unaware because they were fish in the fishbowl and the water was just fine, or they didn't want to rock the boat and risk losing whatever they had that made their lives comfortable.
I really do think that there has been tremendous pressure put to bear on the majority of American households. And it's true. It's not pulling numbers out of the air. The cost of living has gone up and it's become harder and harder. You have both people now working to support a household if you have children. And I really think it's because people have been working their butts off. That's really what my book is about. People busting their ass just trying to keep a toehold, really, into the middle class, and so there's just really no time. So in the Social Dilemma, this gal Shoshana, I forget her name, she's a Harvard professor, she speaks to this in a very compassionate way. So here's someone who is one of the elite, right? With a social conscience, who is acknowledging how hard people have been working. And a lot of these things that we use, for instance, on our phones, do create convenience, which we need to navigate. We need this. And yet, to this idea that we need to create enough time and space to be able to consider, to be able to take a breath and to consider things, right?
Right.
And part of it is coming out of the dream of acquisition that's being marketed to us, which we've all had. So I remember, the term yuppie was the young, upwardly mobile professional. That was the big thing in the 80s. I remember at that time, the knock on these young professionals, which would be like lawyers, accountants, and such, was that, they could afford to buy a new Beamer, but they couldn't afford to buy a house. Right. But even at that time, the Beamer cost as much as a house used to cost.
Wow.
Even then. So, but and there's this, well, why does it have to be a Beamer? Right. And when you think about, just the proliferation of goods since 2000 for electronics.
Yeah.
Where TVs now are mounted on your wall, and now they're access to the computer. It's a monitor for your computer as well as a television, and it's smart. So now it can report back what you're doing. So now you can even talk to a little speaker on the side and tell it what you want. And all of it is right. So we have this major reset going on. And I'm just going to pitch anybody who has been listening to the diatribe. The answer is developing and cultivating our consciousness to some sense of a power greater than we are, however it is that you get there. Right? But it's important to, and I think it needs to be something more than spiritual, but not religious. Right? I used to think spiritual but not religious was the new denomination. But now I think spiritual but not religious is, yes, I think about spiritual stuff, but don't ask me to do anything, and don't ask me to join anything, and don't ask me to show up for anything. Okay. And that's not going to get it done. Right?
Yeah, there has to be a level of commitment to something.
Commitment. There needs to be some level of giving something up, which may be time. It might be time. It might be a little bit of treasure. You might have to buy a book, or you might have to give up a couple hours on a Friday or a Saturday or a Sunday, depending on your denomination, to be spiritually fed. Right? So I've always said that, Sunday service is you begin your work week on Sunday by doing the spiritual work that helps you to cultivate a consciousness that helps you be a better partner, a better parent, a worker among workers, a better business owner, to be more effective and more productive with our time.
To be more of the spiritual being having a human experience than a human just being. Yeah.
And so as Stephen Covey wrote in his book, The 7 Habits of Effective People, highly effective people, right? So to me, being in spiritual community consistently is begin with the end in mind. And if you can develop that, because you'll be surprised, a commitment to some weekend, let's just call it a weekend practice of a couple hours will help cultivate at least an awareness through the week, if not even 10 minutes of just quiet time, which may even evolve into a meditation practice, but it doesn't have to.
Yeah.
It's just to unplug, man. I look around and it looks to me like folks are frazzled and cooked. And so what I'm knowing for, our little spiritual community here in Granada Hills, we're small but mighty. But I think for many of us, we're no longer going to take spiritual community for granted. I know I'm not.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And so, you know, so here we are doing these little things. I appreciate your willingness to do this with me.
I am honored that you asked and happy to be a part of it. And that's our show for today. I
hope I said something spiritual today. I
like that you brought it around. You tied that bow on the end of like all this stuff actually has a spiritual component. So I think,
well, it must, because, you know, it's part of life.
Yeah. So thanks for watching, and be sure to join us on Sundays for the live stream Sunday service, where you'll hear Reverend Mike's talk that we kind of talk about on Thoughts on Talks. And
but it is a much more focused talk, right, Malayna?
Right. Yeah.
And I have notes. I'm just not, you know, shooting my mouth off.
That's what this space is for. Thoughts on Talks is for shooting thoughts out and
right.
digressing from them.
And feel free to comment on them.
Yeah. There's also Wednesday night meditation. So if you need a little anchor for your new meditation practice or to revive an existing one, Wednesday night meditation services with Reverend Mike. And that's at 7, right? And it's live streamed on YouTube. Then you have the book, which is helpful when you need some support in the middle of the night and you don't want to bug anybody. You got the book.
I'm so lonesome. What's Reverend Mike got to say?
Mr. Handy is what you sounded like just there for anybody who watches South Park. And there's Unity Magazine. Check that out. He just subscribed. Very good. That's Sherry Gideon's book. Mastering.
Yeah, I'm trying to find my Science of Mind magazine, but okay, enough of the plugs.
You've got so many reading materials there. So thanks for joining us, and
thank you.
Keep coming back. Okay.
Don't let it dissuade you.
All right. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.